Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Process. Today, I want to talk about your voice. I want to talk about your voice because this is a muscle in your body. Your voice is a muscle, and it's one of the most important muscles, arguably, in your body because it is the muscle that you use to get your needs met, to stand up for yourself, to speak up when something is wrong, to set the intentions for yourself, to love other people. There are so many different ways that we use our voice, and it is a skill that you can improve. It is something that you can hone and practice and get better at over time if you are intentional about it. But I think it's something that, especially as women, it can become very easily conditioned into us, or not easily conditioned, but consistently conditioned into us from a very young age to not speak up and to not use our voice because of all these different reasons of maybe we're too much, maybe we are too aggressive or assertive, maybe we come across as bitchy. All of these different reasons lead to the same conclusion that I can't speak up and my voice isn't worth hearing. So I want to talk a little bit about my own experience of this for me, and then what I am currently working on to change this, as well as some really exciting stories that I've heard from both friends and clients recently where they are also starting to use their voice. So, to dive straight into the background for myself, as you wouldn't know if you listened to previous episodes, I grew up in a beautiful family. I was very sheltered and loved in my family, and both of my parents were teachers. I also was very excited about learning from a very young age. And because I was born in February, in Canada, there was an option for children that were born before February 28th to be able to start school early. And I was obsessed with learning. I was obsessed with puzzles and numbers and letters and all of the things. And so when I was 4, I jumped into school and I was the youngest one in my class. Now, from a very young age, I learned, or I realized, maybe not even consciously, but subconsciously, that the way that school was set up worked really well for my brain. I found it very intuitive a lot of the time. I felt like I was able to pick things up at the lower levels quite quickly. And then I also think that I was quite good with my memory. So that served me well as well because I was able to take in information, hear it once or twice, and be able to log that information, at least in my short-term memory. I believe that a lot of this was memorization because as I got to the higher grades, which I've spoken about before, I feel as though I didn't actually learn a lot of the concepts. I think I learned how to memorize concepts. But anyway, I had this running kind of story that I was really smart and I was good at things. And when I did an assignment, I would get a really high mark. And if I didn't, it would really get to me. I can remember as far back as grade 5. Oh, actually, I have a memory from grade 3 where I cheated on a test because I was so scared of doing poorly. And I also remember during the test, there was one question where I was like, no, the answer key is wrong. And I put in a different answer. And then, of course, I was wrong. And I went to my teacher after and told her what happened because I felt so bad. But I was I was motivated to do that because I was so scared I wasn't going to get a good mark. And then in grade 5, I remember there was another situation where my teacher gave us one question. And so it was either you're going to get it right or you're going to get it wrong. And I remember this, I can see the piece of paper. I can literally see the piece of paper in front of me. It was about a tree. And if the tree was to get hit in a storm or somehow bent or broken, where would it grow from there? Would it grow up? Would it grow to the side? Would it grow down? Whatever the 4 options were. I don't remember exactly, but I know that's what the question was on. And I chose the wrong thing. And so I technically failed this question. And that was when I was 9 or 10 years old. I'm now 31. And I remember that so vividly because it started to really instill this pattern that I need to know the answers all the time. And if I don't know the answers, I'm dumb. And that means I shouldn't speak. So, just to connect this back to the voice and why, for me, speaking up became this really scary thing because I put so much pressure on myself before I even said anything to make sure that it was going to be right. That actually reminds me of another example in grade 4. Guys, I really have such vivid memories around this, which really shows to me just how deep this pattern really goes. But in grade 4, our teacher asked us what century we were in. And I so confidently put my hand up and said, we're in the 20th century. And of course, we're in the 21st century. So I got it wrong. And I said it wrong in front of the whole class. And by this point, again, I had already had this story and this reputation of being the smart girl. So this felt so threatening to my sense of self that it taught me, don't speak up unless you are absolutely certain that you have the answers. If you don't have the answers, just wait and listen and see if somebody else says it. Maybe you can add on once you're pretty sure that what you have to say is correct. But otherwise, just keep quiet. So this continued all through middle school, all through high school. I remember all the time I would have an idea when someone asked a question in class, a teacher asked a question or a student asked a question, or we were in group work, and I would bite my tongue and I wouldn't say anything because I didn't know for sure if I was going to say it right, or maybe I'd be partially right, partially wrong. And see, even this language that I'm using of right and wrong, as though there's only ever one right answer. This is still an ongoing journey for me because it is so deeply intertwined with who I have seen myself to be for most of my life. So I never used my voice. I never spoke up in class. I was so quiet, and I would do my work, and, I would be able to get really good grades on my assignments because I had time to check things and go over things. But that idea of when someone asks a question and you put your hand up right away, or you speak up in the meeting, or you share your thoughts in like an impromptu kind of way, that felt so impossible to me, beyond impossible. It was inconceivable for me to even attempt to do that because there was a risk that I would make a fool of myself, that people would think I was dumb, that this reputation was going to crumble to the ground. And without being the smart girl, who even was I? I didn't really know, to be honest, because my whole identity was shaped around this concept and around this sense of being smart, which is so interesting when you think about it, because a lot of times when I see people speak up now, those are the people that I see as intelligent a lot of the time. Is like, wow, they shared their idea and what they said was so interesting. But for myself, I didn't give myself that same grace or that same possibility because maybe they could get it wrong, or I never even thought about right or wrong with them. Actually, with other people, I would just listen and be like, wow, what a cool perspective. Whereas for myself, it was always, no, it needs to be 100% or it's 0%. And that's, again, coming back to that all or nothing thinking that I so often get stuck in, or got stuck in. Still do sometimes, to be honest. But it's something that I talk about a lot with my clients, and something that just comes up a lot, I think, for us as women, but also just as people that have gone through this school system, because we weren't really taught to look for nuance. We were taught to look for right and wrong. We were taught to look for a 90% means that you nailed it, and a 60% means that you're dumb and that you don't understand. And that's just it. There's no changing it. You just are a 60% person, or you're a 90% person. And those are kind of the two options. Obviously there's things in between as well, but just to kind of identify that there's really this spectrum of when you get into a certain position, you can stay there because the school system would then reinforce that you are that type of person. So this continued through my early adult years as well. Even into university, I had these experiences. I've talked about them before, so I don't need to go into detail about all of that again. You can go back to previous episodes and have a listen. But talking about specifically using my voice, I became an adult who was really scared to set boundaries, really scared to speak up if something frustrated me or hurt me or went against my values. I would act in integrity with my values myself, but if there was something happening around me, I had no idea how to approach that situation. I avoided conflict like the plague. I would not bring it up if I could avoid it at all costs. And it just became this self-fulfilling prophecy where I would have some sort of issue and I wouldn't bring it up. I would feel bad about it, get even more frustrated, and then probably do something more passive aggressive or indirect instead of just speaking up and owning my truth and owning what was coming up for me, owning my part in it. All of these things were stifled because I felt so scared to use my voice. Because what if I tried to talk to someone about something and I didn't get it right? What if I said something in the wrong way? What if I unintentionally hurt someone's feelings or upset them or made their day worse? I was constantly managing everyone else's feelings and everyone else's experience at the expense of my own because I had just no skill set really to be able to trust myself to speak and trust myself that I do have ideas that are worth sharing. And it's only been in the last few years that I have started to actively look at this pattern and look at the ways that I was essentially censoring myself or muting myself because of this fear. When I finished my master's degree, and even during my master's degree, when I was doing my placements as a speech pathologist, I had my first sort of experience where I was the authority in an interaction. So I had a parent coming in and a little kid who had some sort of communication difficulties going on. The parent is very stressed and concerned about this. And it all of a sudden was on me to deliver the guidance and support for this family in a way that made sense to them, in a way that made them feel seen, in a way that supported their child to be able to communicate better. I had to use my voice. I had to explain myself. And when they would ask a question, I couldn't look around the room and wait for someone else to speak. It was only me. I was the only person in the room other than the family. So I had no choice but to step up and to start using my voice in that way. And it felt very foreign, very scary, but it also came with this sense of relief that, look, I wasn't going to get it right. And I learned how to, I wasn't going to get it right every single time. And I learned how to reply to a question that I didn't know the answer to by saying, actually, I don't know the answer to that, but I would love to go ask my supervisor or go look into the research and then get back to you next week. And I started to realize, hang on, there is more nuance here. And I do have ideas that are helpful. I am helping families and I have learned things that are really beneficial for other people. So that then continued into my professional life over the last 5 and a bit years, where I have had so many reps to practice one-on-one with families to develop this sense of, I can do this, I can use my voice, and I can speak up. But where I still wasn't really doing this was in moments where there was some sort of conflict or issue with the family, say things weren't working out, it wasn't the right fit. I knew it wasn't the right fit. I'm sure they knew it wasn't the right fit because it's not always going to be the right fit when you're finding a coach or a therapist or whatever it is. We're not meant to get along with every single person we interact with, and that's fine. But as the therapist, part of my responsibility is being able to go, hey, I actually don't think that this is the right fit for us. And maybe it would be better if we can find a different speech therapist that has a different approach, et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't know how to do that. And so I would live in this limbo of, I know it's not really working. They know it's not really working. It's just this weird in between place because I was too scared to just speak honestly and say, hey, let's check in. How are things going? It seems like maybe we're not totally aligned, or maybe priorities have changed. And it wasn't about the fact that I was taking it personally, because I understand that it's very much the family's choice. And for anyone that's dealing with a coach or a therapist or any kind of service, it is the consumer's choice as to whether it is a good fit for them or not. And it's not necessarily a reflection on the therapist. A lot of times it's just not the right fit. But I didn't know how to sit in these conversations. I found it so challenging and so scary, and like I was going to offend them or upset them in some way. Anyway, so this has been a more recent focus in the last couple of years, and then especially as I have become a business owner. So, shifting into what I am doing now and how I am working on this, there's a few different things that I'm doing. But I would say the biggest one is really taking a moment whenever I am finding myself, especially having a feeling of frustration or irritation about something, is to take a step back and go, okay, what's coming up here? Why am I getting upset or frustrated or triggered? And what really needs to happen? Because 99% of the time, there's two things. Either I need to let something go because I'm projecting my own stuff onto someone else that is not even affecting them at all. So I need to speak to myself and use my voice to soothe myself or reassure myself or give myself some tough love and take some ownership of how I maybe am not showing up in the best way. But the second way is that I need to speak up, and I need to speak honestly about whatever it is that the situation is about. Because up until this point, I would go for any other possible outcome, any other option that I could take that didn't involve me having to speak directly to the person that there was a potential issue with. Any way that I could get out of that, I would. But most of the time, it's one of those two things. Either I need to go inward or I need to use my voice and have the hard conversation. I have been practicing this several times. I've even had 2 or 3 situations just in the last week where I noticed the feeling. I noticed that it was getting in my way of being productive, of getting other tasks done. And instead of pushing it down, I booked in a time to have a conversation, or I sent an email, or I picked up the phone and put their number in and gave them a call. Because this practice of using your voice, for me, is about being able to just own my own experience, call out the things that are happening, and use it to either set a boundary or to shift a relationship setup or do something that is going to have some sort of forward movement, as opposed to sitting in it, feeling stressed, feeling irritated, and ultimately resentful because I'm not saying what I need to say. And then a lot of times I would then put that on the other person as well, because I'm like, oh, they did this and this and this and this. But in reality, I have the power to use my voice. This is a muscle. I need to use it. And the more that I use it and the more that I speak up, the stronger this muscle is going to get. And the easier, oh, actually, I say easier, but I'm not sure. I'll come back to that one. I don't know if it's going to get easier or if it's just going to be that I have the conviction to do it because I know what lies on the other side of that action, which is relief and even more conviction and even more evidence that this is something that I can handle and survive and something that needs to happen. So those have been a couple of really recent examples that have helped solidify this for me. I also had a fun challenge from my public speaking coach that I've just recently started working with, which I am so excited about, by the way. This has been a really big goal for me. I have it over here on my wall that says one of the things I'm going to invest in 2026 is a speaking coach. And one of the things that I did to prepare to invest in this coach is start this podcast. So this is episode 27, which means I have a whole bunch of reps behind me now of practicing this skill. And of course, I'm speaking into a microphone, speaking to you directly. And I'm practicing. I'm practicing talking about my experience, articulating my thoughts, and learning how to speak through this stuff and talk about my journey and own the fact that I haven't done a great job of this the whole time. And this is why I am doing it, because I am showing myself and hopefully showing you that by doing consistent practice and putting yourself out there, you actually can get better at anything. So for me, this exciting challenge that I have just received, or that I received last week from my public speaking coach, was to practice facing this fear of rejection. And you may have heard this before if you have seen on social media people that are practicing getting rejected. It's in a book. I can't remember the name of it. I'll see if I can find the name of the book. But essentially, one of the ways that you can do this is by going to a cafe or a market or any sort of vendor, really. And when you go to pay, ask for 10% off. When she told me this initially, I was like, no, I can't do that. I couldn't possibly do that. Are you kidding me? I can't. No, I can't. But then I thought, hang on, this immediate tightness and this immediate tension that I'm feeling, and that you might be feeling too, just from hearing me say this, that's a sign to me that this is part of the muscle that I have not stretched yet. I have not really flexed. So that means I have to do it. I have to do it. And so on Sunday, we went for breakfast as a family, and I went up to order, and I had the thought as I started ordering my meal that, oh my gosh, I could ask for 10% off. And I started wrestling with myself as I was giving the waitress my order. Then she gave me the total, and this was it. This was the last moment that I could do it. And so I did it. And it was incredibly, what's the word? Awkward? Or it felt awkward for me, but it also felt amazing. It felt like such a rush. She said no, which is fine, because that's the whole point, right? Sometimes they might say yes. A lot of the times they'll probably say no. And then you just pay and you go back to your table and you realize, oh, nothing happened. They didn't flip the table and lose their mind at me and tell me to get out of their shop. They didn't, just like stare at me with a cold, blank stare into my soul. Like nothing happened. I just paid, went and sat down, continued the conversation with my husband, and then ate my breakfast and went on with my day. So this is an example that if this feels really scary for you listening to me say it, it's probably something you should try. But for me, it's something that I'm going to be implementing over the next month or so to see how many times I can do this, how many times I can flex this muscle and use my voice in a very simple way, but also a very big way, because it feels so scary and so outside my comfort zone, just like how starting this podcast was. But I know now, almost 30 episodes in, that it's going to change and it's going to feel more manageable and more exciting than scary. So that is a great challenge if you would like to do it. And I just want to share, just to finish off this episode, I want to share a couple of wins that I've had very recently with a client, and then also a friend that messaged me yesterday to tell me about how she is using her voice. So my client has been talking a lot in our sessions about how she really, really wants to get into photography. And it's something that she has loved for a long time. She always takes photos, posts them on her personal Instagram. Absolutely stunning photos, by the way. But there has been this block for her around, well, how do I do this more publicly, or how do I go about potentially making it part of my work and income stream? Am I even good enough to do that? All these thoughts that come up and all these beliefs that she has around what's possible for her. Now, we have been breaking down a lot of these limiting beliefs in our sessions, but something that came as a result of having these conversations was that she went out and asked someone who was opening a new yoga studio, she asked them if she could come and take pictures. Now, this person said no because they already had someone lined up. But for this client, it actually had nothing to do with what the person was going to say. And it had everything to do with stepping outside of her comfort zone and asking the question and putting herself out there, just like how I did with asking for 10% off. The exact same situation of going, look, I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to use my voice. And it actually doesn't matter what the outcome of what they say is, because I'm not worried about that. The outcome that I'm worried about is that I sat in the discomfort and I said something and I stepped forward and I said, hey, I'm doing this now. And I would love to practice my skill by taking some photos for your studio during a session. And it was so interesting to listen to her talk about this and how excited she felt, even when she got the no. And that's exactly how I felt too. Because using your voice and really allowing yourself to take up space and to declare who you are and what you want, that in itself is such an unlock. It is such a game changer in terms of how you see yourself, because the more that you're willing to do that, the results will take care of themselves, because eventually someone will say yes. And that will be even more affirming, because you'll think, wait, what? I asked for something and then they said yes. And now I get to do this really exciting thing that I love, or I get the 10% discount, or I get to have this interaction with someone. Oh my gosh, I need to do this more and more and more. And then the momentum builds from there. But it starts by being able to take the leap and trust your voice. Trust this muscle. Trust that what you have to say, what you have to offer is worth being heard. Which leads me into my other example that I just heard from a friend yesterday, and she is starting a business doing a clothing line for children. And one of the things that she is working on right now is getting different manufacturers involved, getting different samples in, and then starting to do the bigger orders of product to get shipped here so that she can start selling it, which is so exciting. And yesterday she sent me a voice note because she said that she had a conversation where the manufacturer said, hey, here's the pricing for the bags that you want to order. And instead of just saying, okay, yep, sounds good, she decided to come back and reply with, well, what if we did this price instead? Not knowing what he was going to say, but just thinking to herself, you know what? Who cares? I'm just going to ask, and maybe he'll say yes, maybe he'll say no, but it doesn't matter because I can actually negotiate and I can actually use my voice in this way. And then he said, sure, why not? So now she has been able to save money on every single bag that she purchases from here on out. But way more importantly, she has built evidence that using her voice, opening her mouth and speaking up and saying something and just going for it has resulted in this incredible opportunity. So now the next time that she's in this situation, she's going to be more likely to do it again. And maybe next time it'll be a no, but she's still going to get these reps in of, I'm saying the thing, I'm using my voice, I'm speaking up, I'm taking up space because I deserve to, and because my voice is worthy of being heard. So if you are listening to this today, my challenge to you, just like my public speaking coach, Annalise McCarthy, always says, and if you're not following her on Instagram, you absolutely should. She's amazing. Her daily challenge is use your voice. Use your voice for something, whether it's at work in a meeting, whether it's a conversation with a friend, whether it's with your child, in the way that you show up and work through something challenging. My challenge to you today, if you are listening to this, use your voice. All right, guys, that's everything for this episode. I would love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts, you can reach out to me on Instagram. You can leave a comment on this YouTube video. Please leave us a review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I am so, so grateful to have you here. I hope you have an incredible rest of your day, whatever it is that you're doing, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.